For 28 years, I was the one who made everything work. The one who stayed late to clean up after family dinners nobody thanked me for. The one who drove 3 hours round trip to pick up my mother when her car broke down, then turned around and drove home in time to get my kids to school. The one who swallowed every sharp comment, every sideways glance, every moment where I was made to feel just slightly less than everyone else in that house. I was good at it. Too good. My sister Fiona was the one my parents built their lives around. Not in a way they'd ever admit out loud. No, in my family, everything was carefully worded, carefully framed. But you know when you're the other one. You just know. Fiona got the college fund. I got loans I'm still paying off. Fiona got the down payment on her house as a gift. I got a card that said, "We're so proud of you." When my husband Caleb and I closed on our place with nothing but our own savings and a lot of anxiety, Fiona got the phone calls. I got the voicemails. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Caleb. I had our 2 kids, Owen, who was 9, and Stella, who had just turned 7. I had a life I actually loved, even if my family never seemed all that interested in it. The trouble with being the peacemaker is that peace isn't free. Someone always pays for it. For a long time, that someone was me. It started the way these things usually do, with something small. Fiona's daughter Macy was turning 8 in October. My kids adored Macy. She was their cousin, their person, the one they asked about whenever we drove past Fiona's neighborhood. Owen used to save the last piece of Halloween candy to give her. Stella once made Macy a birthday card that took her 4 days to finish, complete with hand-drawn horses and glitter glue that got everywhere. So when the invitation came, a proper printed one, which honestly surprised me, I read it twice. It was addressed to me and Caleb. Just us, not the Harmon family. Not Owen, Stella, and parents. Just our names. I assumed it was a mistake. I actually laughed a little, showed it to Caleb, and said, "They must have forgotten to add the kids." Caleb didn't laugh. He looked at the envelope for a second longer than I expected, then set it down on the counter without a word. I called Fiona that evening. "Oh," she said when I asked about it. Not, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that was a typo." Just, "Oh." Then, yeah, so Maisie really wanted it to be more of a grown-up party this year. You know, her close friends from school, the adults. We figured kids would just make it chaotic. I waited for the part where she said, "Except yours, obviously they're her cousins." That part didn't come. "So Owen and Stella aren't invited," I said slowly. "I mean, it's not personal. It's just the vibe we're going for. You can drop them with the sitter, right? It'll be fun, like a real adult afternoon for once." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Okay," I finally said. "Let me think about it." I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a long time. Caleb was at the table when I came in. He could read me the way only someone who's been married to you for 11 years can. "What did she say?" I told him. He was quiet. Then, "We're not going." Caleb. "They didn't invite our kids to their cousin's birthday party." "Owen saves candy for that little girl." "Stella spent a week making her a card last year." He wasn't raising his voice. Caleb never raised his voice. That was somehow worse. "We're not going. If we don't go, my mother will lose her mind. You know how she gets. She'll call it an attack on the family. She'll say I'm poisoning our kids against their aunt. She'll let her." I wanted to agree with him. I really did. But I've been managing my mother's reactions my entire life, and the thought of just letting her, of not smoothing it over, not preemptively explaining, not cushioning the fall, felt like stepping off a ledge I'd been standing near for 30 years. I told Caleb I needed a few days to figure out what to say. He nodded, but the way he looked at me, not angry, just tired, like he'd had this exact conversation with me 100 times before in 100 different forms, stayed with me. I didn't tell Owen and Stella right away. I kept thinking I'd find a way to fix it first. That Fiona would call back and say she'd reconsidered. That my mother would step in and say, "Obviously the kids are coming, don't be ridiculous." My mother calls on a Thursday night. I was washing dishes and Owen was at the table doing homework. I almost didn't pick up. "I heard you're making this into a whole thing," she said, before I'd even finished saying hello. "I'm not making it into anything. I just thought it was strange that Owen and Stella weren't included. Fiona has the right to plan her daughter's party however she wants. Of course she does. But these are her niece and nephew. They're Maisie's cousins. They talk about her constantly. Kids are a lot of work at parties. You, of all people, should understand that. I looked over at Owen, who was chewing on his pencil and staring at a math problem. He had no idea what was happening. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not going to bring my kids to a party and leave my kids home. Either we all go or none of us go." There was a pause. "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. Get a sitter. Come enjoy yourself for one afternoon. Why does everything have to be a fight with you?" I almost said fine. I felt it right on the edge of my tongue, that old reflex. Fine. Whatever you need, I'll figure it out. 28 years of that reflex. "I'll think about it," I said instead. I hung up, finished the dishes, helped Owen with his homework, read Stella her chapter, and then sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a while. Caleb found me there. "I'm not going," I said. He sat down next to me. "Okay. I'm going to have to call my mother and tell her, and she's going to react, and it's going to be a whole thing." "I know. I just want you to know I'm not doing this lightly." He took my hand. "I know that too. I called Fiona the next morning and told her we wouldn't be coming. I kept it short. I said I wasn't comfortable leaving my kids out of a family event, and I hope she understood. She did not understand. So you're going to make Maisie's birthday about you." "I'm not making it about anyone. I'm just telling you we won't be there. Mom is going to be devastated." "Okay." There was a pause. I think she expected more. An apology, maybe. An offer to negotiate. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said. "I'll send Maisie a gift. I hope she has a wonderful birthday." I hung up before she could answer. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, exactly. More like the specific physical sensation of doing something you've been terrified to do for decades and realizing you're still standing. The party came and went on a Saturday in October. We took the kids apple picking instead, which Owen declared the best day ever because he found an apple the size of his head. Stella made a whole story about it on the drive home involving dragons and a magic orchard. It was, genuinely, a beautiful afternoon. My mother called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 20 minutes later. And again. On the fourth call, I picked up. I was tired and I knew from experience that not answering only escalated things. "I need you to understand what you did today," she said. "Mom, we went apple picking. We had a really nice day." Maisie was asking about Owen and Stella. She cried. Something tightened in my chest. Maisie was told her cousins couldn't come to her party. That's why she cried. Fiona explained it to her. What did Fiona explain? That we chose not to come? Because the real explanation is that our kids were excluded from a family birthday party and I wasn't going to pretend that was normal. My mother switched tactics. That's what she did when direct confrontation wasn't working. I just don't understand why you always have to make everything so hard. Fiona has so much on her plate right now. Her husband is up for a promotion. The house. Maisie's school stuff. She just wanted one nice afternoon. And I wanted my kids to be treated like part of this family. Silence. Then, "You've always been like this. Even as a little girl. So sensitive." I'd heard that one before. So many times it had almost lost its sting. Almost. "I love you, Mom," I said. "I'll talk to you later." I set the phone down on the counter and stood very still for a moment. Caleb was in the living room. I could hear the low sound of the TV. I walked in, sat down next to him, and put my head on his shoulder. He didn't say anything, just put his arm around me. Things went quiet for about 10 days. My mother didn't call. Fiona didn't call. The silence felt loaded, the way it does in my family, not peaceful, but waiting. Then on a Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was a FaceTime call from my mother's number. This wasn't unusual. She FaceTimed occasionally when she wanted to show me something or check in on the kids. Owen and Stella were doing homework at the kitchen table. I answered and held the phone up, figuring she wanted to see them. "There they are," my mother said in a warm voice that didn't match anything from the last 2 weeks. The kids looked up. Owen waved. Stella smiled. Hi, Grandma. Hi, babies. How was school today? For a few minutes, it seemed normal. Owen told her about a project he was doing on volcanoes. Stella showed her a drawing. My mother nodded and smiled and asked questions. And then she said, very gently, very carefully, "Did you know Maisie cried at her birthday party because you weren't there? She kept asking where you were. She kept asking where you were. She was so sad." The shift was immediate. Stella's face fell completely. Owen went still. "She was?" Stella whispered. "She really missed you. She couldn't understand why her favorite cousins didn't come." I watched my daughter's eyes fill with tears. I watched my son's jaw tighten in that way kids do when they're trying not to cry and they don't quite know why. "Mom." My voice came out flat. She looked at me with an expression of perfect innocence. "I'm just telling them the truth," she said. "We're going to go now." I took the phone from where it was propped, looked at my mother's face on the screen for one more second, and ended the call. The kitchen was very quiet. Stella was crying now, softly, her pencil still in her hand. Owen was looking at the table. "Hey," I said, sitting down between them. "Can I explain something?" They looked at me. "The reason you didn't go to Maisie's party is because her mom didn't invite you. That's not your fault. It's not anything you did. And I didn't want to go to a party where my kids weren't welcome." "Does Maisie hate us?" Stella asked. "No, absolutely not. Maisie loves you. This was a grown-up decision that had nothing to do with how Maisie feels about you." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Grandma made it sound like we did something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, neither did Maisie. Some grown-ups make decisions that aren't fair, and that's not on you to fix." He nodded slowly. He was 9, almost 10, and sometimes he understood things more clearly than the adults around him. I got them both through the rest of homework, through dinner, through baths. After they were in bed, I went to find Caleb. I told him what happened. He sat very still while I talked. When I finished, he didn't say anything for almost a full minute. "She did that on purpose," he said. "I know. She looked at our kids and made them cry on purpose." "I know, Caleb." He stood up, walked to the window, stood there with his back to me for a moment. Caleb works in commercial real estate. He's good at it, not in a flashy way, but in a quiet, thorough, relationship-driven way that took him 15 years to build. His network is his career. He's careful about it, protective of it. He doesn't make impulsive decisions. He turned around. "Fiona's husband," he said. "Kyle. What about him? He's been after me for 8 months to bring him in on the Henderson portfolio. You know the one, the mixed-use development over in Riverside." I did know. It was a significant deal. The kind of deal that changes the shape of a career. Caleb, he needed my recommendation to even get in the room. I made some calls on his behalf. Because he's family, I didn't say anything. "I'm going to call him tomorrow," Caleb said, "and let him know I'm pulling back. That will blow everything up. It's already blown up. It's already blown up. Your mother just made our children cry to punish us for having boundaries. I'm not going to continue putting my professional relationships in the service of people who think our kids are a problem." I sat with that for a moment. "He'll be furious," I said. "Yes, Fiona will be furious. Yes. My mother will say we ruined everything. She'll say that regardless. He wasn't wrong." I knew he wasn't wrong. Still, there's a particular grief in watching something end, even when you know it should. "Okay," I said quietly. Caleb called Kyle the next morning. He kept it professional. Told him that due to changing circumstances, he was going to step back from the Henderson recommendation and focus his involvement on other projects. He was polite. He was calm. He didn't explain because he didn't owe an explanation. That's the thing about professional relationships. You don't have to justify everything. You just adjust. Kyle did not take it politely. He called back twice. Then he called Fiona. Then my mother called me at 11 in the morning while I was at work, and I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it at lunch. She sounded furious, and then she sounded tearful, and then she sounded furious again, which was her usual pattern when she wanted maximum effect. Fiona texted me a message that was so long I had to scroll 3 times to read it all. The general argument was that Caleb had sabotaged Kyle's career out of spite over a birthday party. that I had always been jealous of her, that my kids were being weaponized, and that I needed to fix this. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. That evening, my mother called Caleb directly. He answered, which surprised me. He let her speak for about 4 minutes without interrupting. Then he said calmly, "I understand you're upset. My decision was based on a professional reassessment and it's final. I'm not going to discuss it further. I hope you have a good evening." And he hung up. I stared at him. "How are you so calm?" I asked. "Because I've been waiting for this conversation for about 6 years," he said simply. The weeks that followed were loud and then suddenly, startlingly quiet. My mother made several more attempts. Phone calls, a handwritten letter that arrived on a Wednesday and made me cry in the driveway before I even opened it all the way. A message sent through my aunt, who clearly had no idea what she was getting in the middle of. Fiona sent 2 more texts. Kyle sent 1 email to Caleb that Caleb forwarded to his attorney just to have it on record. And then, around Thanksgiving, it just stopped, like everyone exhausted themselves. I won't pretend the quiet was easy. There's a particular loneliness in a family silence that you didn't ask for, even when you know it was the right thing. The holidays were smaller that year. My aunt invited us for Thanksgiving and we went, and it was genuinely warm and uncomplicated in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Owen ate 3 plates of mashed potatoes. Stella made friends with the dog. In January, Fiona sent me an email, not a long one. She said she'd been thinking. She said she knew the party invitation had come out badly. She said she'd like to talk, if I was open to it. I read it many times. I wrote back and said I was open to talking, but that I needed her to understand that how my kids were treated wasn't something I was willing to just move past without it being acknowledged directly. Not a long email, just clear. She wrote back within an hour. She said she understood. She said she was sorry she hadn't thought more carefully about what it would mean to exclude Owen and Stella. She didn't say everything perfectly, but she said it. We had coffee in February. It was slightly awkward, the way things are when you're rebuilding something that's been broken and you haven't quite agreed yet on what the new version looks like. But it was real. It was 2 people actually trying, which was more than we'd managed in a long time. My mother was harder. She's still harder. We talk, but less, and differently. I no longer rearrange my life to accommodate her moods, and I think part of her knows something has shifted permanently. Sometimes that makes her pull back. Sometimes it makes her try in the unsteady, unpracticed way of someone who isn't sure how to be in a relationship with you once you've stopped letting them set all the rules. I don't know what happens next with her. I'm trying to make peace with not knowing. What I do know is this. The last Saturday in March, Macy's family came over for the first time since everything fell apart. Fiona brought cupcakes. Kyle stayed in the car for about 10 minutes before Fiona went back out, and I watched through the window while they had what appeared to be a tense and quiet conversation. He came in eventually. He and Caleb didn't say much to each other, but they were in the same room and nobody set anything on fire, so I counted it. Owen and Macy immediately disappeared into the backyard. Within 15 minutes, they were building something elaborate out of sticks and mud that Owen explained was a drainage system for a future underground city, which, sure kid, okay. Stella sat at the kitchen table with her sketchbook and showed Maisie's little brother her drawings. I stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee and watched my children just be loud and happy and completely unaware of the months of tension that had led to this afternoon. Fiona came to stand next to me. "They're good kids," she said. "They really are," I said. We stood there for a minute without talking, which was its own kind of progress. I thought about the version of myself from a year ago who would have driven to that birthday party with a sitter back home, smiled through the whole afternoon, driven back in silence, and told herself it was fine. The version who had been so good at absorbing everything that she'd almost convinced herself she felt nothing. I thought about Owen's face when my mother made him feel like he'd done something wrong. Stella's tears over a situation she was too young to understand. The quiet way Caleb stood up, not with a speech or a declaration, but with a phone call the next morning that said clearly and without drama, "This is where the line is." I'd spent so long being the peacemaker that I had forgotten peace was supposed to include me too. I'm still learning that. I won't pretend I have it figured out. But on that afternoon in March, with mud-covered kids in my backyard, and coffee going cold in my hand, and a relationship with my sister that was fragile but real, I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could easily remember. Like I was actually in my own life. Not managing it, not absorbing it, just in it. That, it turns out, is enough. I keep coming back to a moment I almost didn't notice at the time. Owen, 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a pencil in his hand, looking at me after my mother ended that FaceTime call and asking very quietly whether he had done something wrong. He hadn't. Neither had Stella. But that question has stayed with me, because it's the same question I spent most of my childhood asking myself and never fully answering. That's the thing about patterns in families. They don't announce themselves. They just repeat, quietly, until a child sits at a table wondering what they did to deserve being left out. And you recognize the feeling, because you've had it your entire life. What I've come to understand is that what happened wasn't really about a birthday party. It was about what happens when people discover that consequences are real. My sister made a choice. My mother made a worse one. She looked at 2 children who had done nothing wrong and deliberately made them feel it. And Caleb, without a speech or a scene, simply adjusted accordingly. He had extended trust to people who treated our family as optional, and when that became undeniable, he stopped. Not out of anger, out of clarity. There's a kind of intelligence in that I used to mistake for coldness. It isn't. It's the ability to see a situation honestly, without letting loyalty or guilt or the fear of someone else's reaction rewrite what's actually in front of you. I didn't have that for a long time. I was so practiced at managing everyone else's emotions that I'd stopped trusting my own read of things. I tell myself I was keeping the peace, but peace for whom? Not for me. Not, it turned out, for my kids. The courage it took to not go to that party, to just not go and hold that line when my mother called 4 times, when Fiona's text came in 3 scrolling pages long. That didn't feel like courage in the moment. It felt like dread, like waiting for something to hit. But I've started to think that's what doing the right thing often feels like when you've spent years avoiding it. Not triumphant, just hard and then done. What came after was harder in some ways. The silence, the letter in the driveway, rebuilding something with Fiona that was honest instead of just functional. None of that was clean or quick. It required me to stay in discomfort without flinching, to say clearly what I needed without apologizing for needing it, and to keep showing up even when I wasn't sure it was going to work. I think about the afternoon in March when Owen and Maisie disappeared into the backyard together with their sticks and their plans for an underground city. I think about how much I almost gave up, how many more years I could have spent absorbing, smoothing, pretending, and how close I came to my kids never knowing a version of their mother who held the line. That's the version I want them to grow up knowing, not the one who kept everyone comfortable, the one who decided that her family, the one she and Caleb built, was worth protecting even when it cost something. That turned out to be enough to change everything.